With a smile that radiates warmth and a voice that resonates across the globe, Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle has become one of the Catholic Church's most captivating figures. Born in Manila's bustling streets, he's risen to the Vatican's highest ranks, charming millions with his humility and bridging divides between cultures, faiths, and generations. But now, the question looms larger than ever: could he be the next pope? What is it about him that has charmed the Catholic world? Do you know what it's like growing up in the heart of Manila? It's a city alive with the sounds of jeepneys, street vendors, and a community that thrives on faith and resilience. This is where Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle's journey began. Born in 1957 into a modest but deeply religious family, Tagle's early life was a tapestry of simple joys, a strong sense of community, and a devotion to faith that would one day take him to the highest ranks of the Catholic Church. Known affectionately as Chito, young Tagle had a magnetic personality even as a child. He excelled academically and was quick to help others, whether in his neighborhood or his local parish. That strong sense of connection and care became the foundation of his calling to priesthood, a calling he embraced wholeheartedly. After earning degrees in philosophy and theology at the prestigious Ateneo de Manila University, he traveled to Rome to deepen his studies. It was there that he earned his doctorate in sacred theology, focusing on how church leaders could work more collaboratively. Even as a student, Tagle was already thinking about how the church could better serve its people. Tagle's priestly career officially began in 1982, but he was never one to stay confined to the altar. From the very beginning, he prioritized being with the people, listening to their stories, and walking with them through life's ups and downs. His warmth and constant smile earned him the nickname, the Smiling Priest. It wasn't just a title, it was a reflection of how he approached his ministry. For Tagle, faith was about building relationships and creating spaces where people felt understood and supported. His leadership skills didn't go unnoticed. In 2011, he was appointed Archbishop of Manila, a role that placed him at the helm of one of the most influential dioceses in Asia. It was a significant responsibility, but Tagle carried it with humility and grace. From his very first homily as Archbishop, he made it clear that this wasn't about him. "The mission is not mine, it is Christ's," he said, setting the tone for a leadership style rooted in service. As Archbishop, Tagle became known for his ability to connect deeply with people from all walks of life. He was a champion for the poor, the marginalized, and those often overlooked by society. His leadership during crises like Typhoon Haiyan in 2013 was particularly striking. When one of the strongest storms in recorded history devastated parts of the Philippines, Tagle was at the forefront, rallying support, comforting survivors, and reminding the world of the resilience of his people. In 2012, Tagle's influence took a giant leap when he was named a cardinal by Pope Benedict. At just 55 years old, he was one of the youngest cardinals at the time, and his appointment signaled a recognition of his unique. Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle has the remarkable ability to bridge tradition with modernity. Suddenly, Tagle wasn't just a local leader, he was a global figure. He participated in major Vatican synods, where his insights on family, evangelization, and social justice resonated with Catholics around the world. But what makes Tagle stand out isn't just his credentials or accomplishments, it's the way he leads. His style is approachable, empathetic, and deeply human. Whether he's speaking at a large conference or chatting with parishioners after Mass, he has a way of making everyone feel like they matter. He doesn't come across as someone preaching from a distance, he feels like someone walking alongside you, understanding your struggles and joys. When Tagle was appointed prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples in 2019, his role expanded even further. Often referred to as the Red Pope because of its immense influence, this position put Tagle in charge of the Church's missionary efforts worldwide. In essence, he became the face of the Church's outreach to the world, a role he embraced with the same humility and energy he had always shown. So, how does a boy from Manila, raised in a modest home, grow into one of the most influential leaders in the Catholic Church? This is a story of faith, hard work, and a deep commitment to serving others. His journey is as inspiring as it is unique, and it raises a compelling question: is this the kind of leader the Church needs right now? Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle's influence isn't just confined to the pulpit or the Vatican halls, it spans continents, cultures, and communities. His leadership reflects the reality of a church that's no longer centered solely in Europe but is increasingly global in its reach. When Tagle took on the role of prefect of the Congregation for the Evangelization of Peoples in 2019, he wasn't stepping into uncharted territory, he was stepping into the heart of what he had always championed, bringing faith to life in every corner of the world. Under Tagle's leadership, the Vatican launched targeted programs to address specific regional needs. For example, in sub-Saharan Africa, where many Catholics face economic hardship, he initiated partnerships to fund local schools and vocational training programs. In countries like Myanmar, he pushed for reconciliation-focused missions to support Catholic communities caught in political and ethnic strife. But it's not just the programs themselves, it's how Tagle approaches them. He's a firm believer in enculturation, the idea that the church should adapt to local cultures rather than impose foreign traditions. In Africa, he's advocated for integrating indigenous music into liturgical celebrations. In India, he supported dioceses experimenting with traditional art forms to tell biblical stories. These might sound like small gestures, but they carry a powerful message. The church doesn't just belong in these places, it belongs to these places. Tagle's vision goes beyond cultural sensitivity. He also recognizes the importance of addressing global challenges that affect everyone, regardless of faith. His work on migration is a prime example. As president of Caritas Internationalis, Tagle oversaw the Share the Journey campaign, a global initiative aimed at building understanding and support for migrants and refugees. He didn't just speak about the dignity of displaced people, he visited refugee camps in Lebanon and Jordan, listening to their stories and amplifying their voices on an international stage. And then there's his commitment to interfaith dialogue. In Southeast Asia, where Catholicism often coexists with Islam, Buddhism, and Hinduism, Tagle has worked tirelessly to foster relationships across religious lines. In Mindanao, a region in the Philippines with a history of Catholic-Muslim conflict, Tagle has supported reconciliation programs that bring leaders from both sides together to address shared concerns like poverty and education. His efforts here are specific, targeted, and deeply personal. He's not just a figurehead, he's a facilitator of real change. Of course, it's impossible to ignore how Tagle connects with people on a personal level. During the COVID-19 pandemic, when much of the world was in isolation, Tagle became a reassuring voice for millions. Through online masses, virtual conferences, and heartfelt video messages, he reminded people that the church is always present, even in the most challenging times. One of his most memorable addresses was during the 2020 International Eucharistic Congress. His speech was comforting, delivered at a moment when the world desperately needed it. What's striking about Tagle is how effortlessly he balances the global with the personal. He's just as comfortable addressing a room full of world leaders as he is sitting on the floor with children during a mission trip. This duality, grand-scale vision combined with ground-level compassion, is what makes his leadership so compelling. But how does this all connect to the future of the church? To understand that, we need to look at how Tagle embodies and extends Pope Francis's vision. Could he be the one to take that vision even further? The heir to Pope Francis's legacy. If Pope Francis has spent the last decade reshaping the Catholic Church, Cardinal Tagle looks ready to take that work to the next level. The parallels between the two are hard to miss, their emphasis on mercy, their focus on the poor, their rejection of clericalism. But what makes Tagle stand out is how he takes these ideals and applies them with a distinctly global and youthful perspective. One area where Tagle has already left a significant mark is the Synod of Bishops on the Family in 2014 and 2015. This was no ordinary church meeting, it tackled some of the most controversial issues facing modern Catholicism, from divorce and remarriage to LGBTQ inclusion. Tagle didn't shy away from the difficult conversations. In fact, he played a key role in ensuring the Synod documents reflected a tone of compassion and openness. He was particularly influential in shaping the language that emphasized accompaniment, walking with people in their struggles rather than condemning them from afar. Tagle's alignment with Pope Francis is also evident in his environmental advocacy. As one of the key voices promoting Laudato Si', Francis's encyclical on caring for the planet, Tagle has pushed the Church to take tangible action. In his home country, the Philippines, Tagle launched initiatives to address deforestation, overfishing, and climate-related disasters. These weren't just token efforts, they included large-scale reforestation projects and community workshops on sustainable agriculture. Globally, he has represented the Vatican at climate summits, using his platform to challenge world leaders to take meaningful action. It's leadership that doesn't just talk, it acts. And then there's the issue of clerical abuse, a crisis that has shaken the Church to its core. Tagle has approached this issue with the same transparency and humility that defines his leadership. During the 2019 Vatican Summit on the Protection of Minors, Tagle delivered an emotional address calling for accountability and a pastoral response to survivors. In the Philippines, he introduced training programs to prevent abuse and created spaces for survivors to share their experiences without fear of judgment or dismissal. It's a stark contrast to the defensiveness that has often characterized the Church's response in the past. But perhaps where Tagle shines brightest is in his connection to young people. At World Youth Days, his addresses are often the most talked about moments. He doesn't preach at young Catholics, he truly speaks to them, acknowledging their doubts, fears, and aspirations. He frequently challenges them to see themselves as active participants in the Church's mission, not just passive observers. One standout moment came during World Youth Day in Panama in 2019, where he told the crowd, "You are not the future of the Church, you are its present." Tagle's ability to connect with younger generations is not just refreshing, it's crucial. In a time when institutional trust is eroding, and many young people feel disconnected from religion, Tagle offers a vision of faith that is both authentic and inclusive. His approach is deeply rooted in Francis's vision of a church that prioritizes mercy and humanity over rigid rules. But unfortunately, even a star as bright as Tagle has his doubters. No leader rises to the top without challenges, and Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle is no exception. While his reputation for humility, global outreach, and charisma is undeniable, the road to the papacy, should it come to that, will not be without its trials. The Catholic Church today is a complex institution facing both internal and external struggles, and Tagle's ability to navigate these challenges could very well define his legacy. One of the most significant criticisms leveled at Tagle is his perceived gentleness. Some have questioned whether his soft-spoken demeanor and emphasis on dialogue make him too idealistic to lead an institution often mired in power dynamics and political maneuvering. Within the Vatican, where navigating the labyrinth of church politics is an art form, Tagle's style might seem out of place. Critics argue that the Church needs a firm hand to address its most pressing issues, someone willing to take bold, decisive actions. However, those who know Tagle argue that his gentleness is not a weakness but a strength. He has repeatedly shown that his compassionate approach can disarm even the staunchest critics. Take, for example, his handling of diocesan reforms in Manila. Faced with resistance from entrenched figures, Tagle managed to implement changes by emphasizing collaboration rather than confrontation. He is a master of persuasion, using his deep empathy to bring people on board without alienating them. Still, there's no denying that the Vatican is a different beast entirely. The Curia, the administrative heart of the Church, has been a source of controversy for decades, plagued by allegations of inefficiency, secrecy, and corruption. Reforming the Curia has been one of Pope Francis's most ambitious projects, and any successor would need to pick up where he leaves off. For Tagle, this means finding a balance between maintaining the Church's traditions and addressing the urgent need for transparency and modernization. While he has not been directly involved in Curia reform thus far, his reputation as a bridge builder could make him an effective mediator in this contentious arena. Another significant challenge for Tagle is the polarization within the Church itself. The Catholic community is far from monolithic, with factions ranging from progressive to ultra-conservative. The rise of populist traditionalist movements, particularly in the West, poses a unique challenge. These groups often view leaders like Tagle, who emphasize compassion and inclusion, as too liberal or even soft on issues like LGBTQ inclusion, women's roles in the Church, and interfaith dialogue. For Tagle, the challenge is not simply to address these divides but to prevent them from widening further. His leadership in past synods shows that he is adept at fostering dialogue, even on controversial topics. But as Pope, the stakes would be much higher. Could he unify a Church increasingly pulled in opposite directions? This is a question that remains open. Externally, the Catholic Church is grappling with declining membership in historically strong regions like Europe and North America. Tegel's work in Asia and Africa, where the Church is growing, gives him unique insight into how to reinvigorate faith communities. However, reversing the decline in secularized societies is a far more complex task. In these regions, the Church is often perceived as out of touch, particularly by younger generations. While Tegel's relatability and media savviness are assets, they would need to be leveraged in unprecedented ways to rebuild trust and relevance. And then there's the elephant in the room, clerical sexual abuse. While Tegel has been vocal in addressing this crisis, systemic change requires more than words. Survivors and advocates are calling for not just accountability but also preventive measures and a cultural shift within the Church. Tegel's ability to lead these efforts would be a critical test of his leadership. Finally, Tegel must contend with the broader socio-political challenges that intersect with faith. Issues like climate change, global inequality, and migration demand a pope who can act as both a moral authority and a practical advocate. Tegel has shown his willingness to engage with these issues, but as the leader of the global Church, his influence, and his accountability, would multiply. For all these challenges, one thing is clear: they will either break a leader or define them. Tegel's history suggests he has the resilience to rise above them, but the papacy brings pressures and scrutiny unlike any other role. The question is not whether he will face these trials, it's how he will respond. And perhaps, in his response, we'll see whether the Church can truly move into the future while holding on to its past. From his rise in Manila to his role as a unifying voice for billions, Tegel's journey is nothing short of inspiring. Could he be the next pope? Only time will tell, but one thing's certain: the Catholic Church is at a crossroads, and leaders like Tegel represent hope for a brighter, more inclusive future. What do you think? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join the conversation.